This is Geneva, and this is Les Acacias, specifically Rue François Dussault, the home of Rolex. Rolex headquarters, and you could call it the engine room of the global watch market. Like it or not, these buildings on this one street in suburban Geneva hold the keys to more power and influence over the watch industry and grey market than anywhere else combined. Behind these famously secretive walls, the king of the watch world ticks away, and the decisions made here on a daily basis plot the future of not just the brand in isolation, but of an entire industry. Rolex's influence and power is substantial to the dynamics of the watch market. As we have seen, this can change due to factors including economic conditions over time, which most people have blamed for the market softening. But all of that could feasibly change regardless of the economy, and barring an imminent asteroid strike and the subsequent ending of the world. They have enormous power through their own decision making to rescue the grey market and send watch values soaring again. But how exactly? Welcome back, I'm Vinny. It is nice to actually get back to talking about watches after these last few weeks, isn't it? Anyway, you might be wondering after that intro, why on earth would Rolex give a damn about the secondary market and values on the secondary market? They are the manufacturer, and of course it is in their interest, the sales on their own primary market, which, let's be honest, couldn't really be any better than what they already are. But I would argue that the success of the Rolex brand and the dominance of their brand is actually built on four main pillars, two of which revolve around the health of the grey market. The first pillar, I would say, is Rolex's reputation for leading the way in craftsmanship and innovation. The second pillar being flex culture. Now, iconic models like the Daytona, the Submariner, and even the Datejust line are seen to be absolute symbols of success. If you're seen to be wearing one of these iconic Rolexes, then you are, in the eyes of many, in general opinion, a successful man. The third pillar being scarcity. You can't get one. You go down to your local authorized dealer and you'll find out that demand far outstrips supply, and you'll be placed on a wait list, which, let's be honest, makes you want Rolex even more than you did before. The final pillar being that guy down the pub. That guy down the pub when you're wearing your Rolex that says to you, "Oh yeah, nice Rolex, mate. That's a good investment, isn't it?" Now, whether you agree with that opinion or not, and obviously as enthusiasts we know that that isn't 100% correct as a generalization. They assume, well, if you buy one and it's worth more than what you paid for it, the AD, on the secondary market, it's a good investment. Those last two pillars that I talked about, scarcity and that guy down the pub saying it's a good investment, are two that really could fall away if the grey market continues to slump. So it's absolutely crucial to the success of the Rolex brand that they uphold these four pillars, and they may deny it as much as they like, that they'll have absolutely nothing to do with the grey market, but guys, they are the grey market now. They've just launched their CPO program. Action number one that Rolex could take to influence the secondary market is supply manipulation. Now, of course, it's absolutely within Rolex's power to change up the supply, lowers the supply of their output. They can also, in theory, halt production of the top 15 or 20 most sought after professional watches that still trade on the secondary market well above their retail list price. Eventually that would mean in a year or two, once that supply has filtered out to the secondary market, that there would be suddenly considerably less of the most wanted Rolex pieces, and in theory the value of those on the secondary market should inflate. Now, this isn't a realistic thing, because to just stop supply of their most sought after models, let's say for a year, would cost vast amounts of money. It would mean that their supply chain model would have to change overnight, and that would cost a fortune, and it doesn't make any business sense to do that. What it does make more business sense to do, though, however, is to just alter the output numbers of those professional line models and substitute them in for models that perhaps are already trading on the secondary market below the retail. Let's talk about Datejusts, for example, or women's pieces under 36mm in size, or gold pieces. Now, these watches actually, specifically the gold pieces, have a much higher margin for Rolex, so it would be within their interest if, let's say, the professional line of watches account for 10% of their 1.2 million piece output of watches per year, so 120,000 watches, let's say, to be distributed around the world. If they cut that in half to 5%, which would be only 60,000 pieces, then suddenly dealers would struggle to get hold of these pieces more than ever before and supply the demand of their clients. Action number 2 that Rolex could take to influence the secondary market would be to make their own certified pre-owned program actually competitive with the grey market. The vast majority of watches that they are trying to sell are 25 to 40% more than the average or mean value that a secondary market dealer like myself would be asking for one of those. The fact that they really are charging such extortionate high prices places them, their authorized dealers, in a whole new market of their own. And that means, guys, that they are having absolutely no influence whatsoever on setting the real value of that watch on the secondary market. Now, what we all expected to happen when the CPO program was launched was to be at threat as dealers who are not authorized dealers, because we expected that the CPO program would come along, they would charge a slightly higher price, but that would mean it would keep us in check and we would have some kind of marker that we had to beat. That hasn't happened. Dealers don't even look at CPO programs because they're so far and away on their own planet that they're not actually in direct competition with the secondary market. If it was to be the case where Rolex charged prices that those watches were actually worth and competed with the secondary market, let's say they charged 10 or 15% more than what I was charging, suddenly I would have to stand up and take notice of that. Yes, there is more greater value, it would be assumed, with buying a watch from the CPO program, but absolutely not 25 to 40% greater value. Over time, we would always, as dealers, be looking at, right, as a market, what is the CPO program charging for this piece? I'll mark that down and say, try to compete with it 10-15% under that. In theory, this would allow them to become a monopolistic big player in the secondary market and engage in a perfectly legal form of market manipulation, which is called cornering the market. Action number 3 then. Rolex could change their entire authorized dealer model and move to a similar setup as with Audemars Piguet, where they focus on a boutique dealer model. Back in 2019, a report on Audemars Piguet said that they intended to become the first major watch brand to sell 100% of its watches from mono-brand stores and expected to complete that move away from multi-brands within 5 years. Audemars Piguet actually went on this journey of their own back in 2019, and fast forward to 2023, the vast majority of their dealer network is now under the AP umbrella. They are their own owned boutiques or franchises of the AP brand. It means that there are far fewer Audemars Piguet outlets that you can buy an AP from. Here in England, there's only 2 of them. Both, I believe, are based in London, and that means that geographically you limit the supply of your output, which means that far fewer people, like myself for example, I live in Manchester in the north of England, would find it difficult to go and buy an AP because I'm not based in London, and there is the first barrier to entry for me. So suddenly they limit the market for their pieces, they limit the supply of their pieces, making it even more desirable. Moving away from an authorized dealer model would mean that they would have full control over their own employees, over proper training of their own employees, so that Rolex staff actually understand and know their product. It would mean that we would move away from this disgusting model where you have to invest £100,000 in jewelry and other brands that the authorized dealer may sell to earn that Rolex that you most lust after, because the Rolex boutique would only be selling Rolex, and therefore over time improve their brand image, moving away from a very toxic authorized dealer model and move towards a system where, yeah, it's first come, first served. What are the major challenges with this model? Well, obviously Rolex couldn't immediately switch to that. It would take several years. And the big problem with it is that Rolex produce 1.2 million watches per year. Audemars Piguet produce around 50,000 pieces a year. So there's a massive difference in output there. It would mean that they would have to open more boutiques in England than just the two to mirror Audemars Piguet, perhaps only in major cities. But I think the biggest positive for this, for Rolex mainly, is the profits that they would capture from this. By cutting out the middleman, the wholesaler, in essentially as what an authorized dealer is, they get to sell their watches that they produce at the retail price. They get to maximize their profits by cutting out that middleman. Why would this influence the secondary market? Well, it would limit access to their brand. The boutique model, certainly for Audemars Piguet, meant fewer stores where you could go in, experience the brand, which made it more exclusive. A greater exclusivity, a watch that's harder to get, a brand that's harder to obtain. You have to live in a certain place, travel so many hundreds of miles to buy it. Makes you as the consumer want it even more. If you want it even more, you're more likely to go to the secondary market. Now, the other major benefit of having their own boutique model where they own their stores is to the CPO program, which I've mentioned previously. A big issue with the CPO program, the reason that prices are so inflated, is because there is a middleman, because the authorized dealer needs to make a profit that makes it worthwhile enough. And that's probably why prices sit so much higher than the rest of the secondary market. Moving to that boutique model would allow them to make less money on the CPO program. So I think absolutely in the long term, it makes perfect business sense that Rolex make that move. So what do you guys think? Is there any actions there that I missed out that perhaps Rolex could do to manipulate, influence the secondary market, save the slumping market values that we're seeing? Well, I think it is pivotal to their brand, to those four pillars that they sustain, the dominance of that brand image. Anyway guys, thanks very much for joining me this week. Go check out beatthewaitlist-watches.com and also our sister company StadiFRAMES at the link stadiumframes.com, and I'll see you next time.